6-monthly update. Oh, good point. Well, no later. Have you got a set thing you want to do?
No, I'm working around this to do something.
Okay, well let's aim for no later than 1, maybe a few minutes before if we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make a commitment to that. Sorry. So we've got Vanessa and Mike from the HCBA, and they're going to present the report, which, councillors, is on page 89. So, yeah, Mike and Vanessa, welcome to the table again. Vanessa's just about taken over the place, we reckon. She's here so often. There was a nervous laugh we heard from some of the staff. Okay, over to the two of you. Thanks. Mike, are you off first?
I'm taking you away.
Thank you.
So you sure have obviously all received the full report, and we've just got some highlights that we were going to go through. Obviously, the ongoing development within Central City continues with new builds starting soon. NZMA on the Duncan and Ebbett side on Tristram Street, which is now well underway. The Hood Street development, the old David's Emporium, so demolition has taken place there. The hotel permit for 611 Victoria Street, the old Les Mills. So they seem to be progressing quite well with that. They've got a number of operators showing some keenness. The Toyota site on the corner of London and Tristram Street that I was just having a discussion with somebody about. So that's an intensive residential development. From memory, it's something like 52 units on there. Parkhaven Apartments on Tristram Street, which is adjoining, seems to be going very well. There's been quite a good take-up of interest in the apartments, which will be at a slightly better level in the market. And then CBD Developments are doing their one on the corner of Vialoo and Ross Trevor, having previously done one on Vialoo Street and one on Anglesey. So that's going well. The latest quarterly data shows positive retail spend in the CBD on the 2017 results. Saw an increase of 2.7% in central city retail spend. Food and liquor, hospitality accounts for over 40% of the retail total, and almost half of the transactional data is from outside of the Waikato. This is an increasing market segment. I think we've seen this worldwide. Retail vacancy rates continue to hold steady at 6.8%, again with food retailing, cafes, restaurants, fast food having the largest presence. The new occupancy surveys for retail and office will be released probably in the next sort of 3 or 4 days, which you should all get. I think we've added you all to the database. And yeah, office occupancy sits steady at about 7%. We should notice that we have removed a lot of stock from the survey because they're being redeveloped or seismically strengthened, but that's not a bad thing. And office stock has increased by nearly 7,000 square metres with the completion of the new Genesis building in the former Food Town site. Over the last 6 months, obviously the Genesis building has been completed, Victoria on the River is completed, which has had some good reviews, and the new Trust Waikato building down London Street has opened, which is really good. It's actually open for public use. If you're a community group, you want to come and use it on a cost-free basis, just go in there and they'll help you use it. So, you know, if you've got organisations that want to, it's a fabulous facility. Vanessa, would you like to carry on about the data?
So just to say, we're getting a really good picture now with data that HCC and we partner with, I guess, looking around the market view data. So being able to look at spend rates, where the spend is coming from, the largest sector of spend, but we've also got pedestrian cameras that we have got about 40 around the CBD, so we're just starting to get the data through from those. So there has been a bit of a staggered start on that recorded data, but over the last few months all of those cameras have become active, so there'll be some interesting trending information we'll be able to see. We'll be able to see when activities or activations happen, whether that affects pedestrian counts, what that will look like. We'll be able to see highlight days, times, so some really good information that we've actually been able to get a good picture that we can read now. And obviously with the office vacancy rates, that's another big part of just being able to tell the right story from the CBD, so very exciting. Just also highlighting that the long-term plan, yeah, it was great from our point of view to see that the theatre was invested in. We were particularly excited to have that going into the CBD and think that'll make a massive difference to the look and feel of the central city. And some of the other key things going forward, just to do a bit of a jump into the future, we seem to be focusing very much around A's at the moment. So we have an Advantage Club, which we're highlighting different aspects of the CBD to people who work here, and that's going really well. So we launched that at the beginning of July. We're focused on our awards, which is happening at the beginning of October, so they are just in that judging process now. And so looking forward to celebrating and recognising the CBD businesses that contribute to the city. We're focused on activation, so obviously we pitched during the long-term plan to have an activation budget around the central city spaces, so we're working through what that's going to look like. And we have finally signed off an ambassador program, which I know Mark will be particularly happy about, and literally that was signed off Monday. So again, 4As seem to be the key focus for us at the moment going forward. But all things that are looking to boost the story, boost the image, boost the promotion of the central city. So particularly excited. So we're both happy to answer any questions based on that report. If you...
Okay, thanks. We've got Gary first up. Thanks.
Thanks very much for your report. Hey, just on page 90, you talk about that food and liquor stroke hospitality accounts for over 40% of your retail total. So that's greater than the warehouse plus the farmers plus the supermarkets.
So the supermarkets fall into that.
Oh, do they? Oh, okay, all
And
right.
obviously we've got 4 key big supermarkets that are on our
Yeah,
CBD
so they are,
fringe.
okay, because I was going to say, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
That's right, okay. All right, so I suppose we all acknowledge that the CBD is changing. We see the old Farmers Building going to be an office, what Waikato District Health Board office block, I suppose you call that. The Genesis, which is an old supermarket, becoming a office and da-da-da. And this is you welcome that? You're agnostic about it? You don't care?
I think
It's great that something's happening.
I think it's a really good thing, and some of those have to change. You look at the farmers model, for example. Farmers now want to be part of malls. They want that access to high pedestrian traffic. So they've got to go to alternative uses, and again, that's a worldwide trend. Genesis to go from 3 buildings into one, effectively purpose-built, is fantastic, and we are going to see more of it. There's no doubt about it. The bulk retail model is probably the largest challenge out there at the moment.
So what do you a challenge for who?
So for building owners and for retailers.
Because they're a competitor.
No, because trying to find tenants for those types of buildings, again, from a retail perspective, is very difficult. Okay. The retail model is changing where they want to be smaller, boutique, or you have an alternative use.
Oh, okay.
So we are going to see more of it.
Okay, which is I suppose we're agnostic to that. It's people making decisions and.
Yeah, I'm also potentially excited. I mean, they're getting numbers of people. Numbers is a really big thing to see a lot of those businesses actually going into centralising into particular spaces. Actually, the activity will follow where those numbers are going, particularly hospitality. Hospitality always follows where the crowd is. So I think that the opportunity exists to keep growing that based on those larger businesses being based in central locations.
Okay, thank you. And there's likelihood or possibility of a hotel in the old Les Mills site and that sort of stuff?
It's looking pretty good. It'll probably, I suspect it'll get delayed until early next year because there's a few other things on in the pipeline. But no, they have, by the sound of it, it sounds there are 3 operators that seem quite keen to try and progress things.
So, and this is not your purview, but my understanding is that there's a regional policy statement or something which says that the centre of retailing should be in town, in the CBD.
That makes a lot of sense.
Is that correct? Am I right in saying that?
I don't know. I think it defines where the regional centres are.
We have a hierarchy.
There's regional centres and there's sub-regional centres and local centres.
So from our point of view, because we're supposed to adhere to this ridiculous thing, that is supposed to be the pinnacle of our retailing thing. So clearly the market is going like that to our regional policy statement, is it? Which is good. I think it's fantastic.
How do you translate that?
It's different languages, but.
But I think it acknowledges, for instance, the base as a sub-regional centre, even though we would probably say in reality that's a regional centre also.
Yeah.
But kind of but that regional policy statement informed, is the jargon I think we use, our district plan. And so are we again seeing our district plan being shown up to be the sham that it is?
I couldn't possibly comment.
Absolute catastrophic, disastrous piece of rubbish.
You're going a bit beyond the brief here of this discussion.
No, this is a key part of it.
No, we're talking about the CBD.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do think that, as Mike was saying, the retail landscape for the CBD is certainly changing. The mall is one...
Not according to our district plan, it's not. No, not supposed to.
The mall is one aspect, and that model holds strong in both the suburban centres as well as here. I think probably Main Street retail is changing its face and has been over a little bit of time, and that
Can you tell our planners that, please?
it's just getting more boutique or more, just smaller. I think retail is changing. People don't need to hold stocks anymore. They don't need to have great big back office, back areas filled with stocks, because you just go and get more stock delivered the next day. So that's made quite a difference to the size that people are looking for retail. So all of that does sort of impact on what works on a main street versus what works in a mall or complements. There's sort of a different identity going for both at the moment.
Thank you.
Thanks. Rob, please.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Mike and Vanessa, for the report. A couple of questions. One, the stats of people working in the CBD, I thought that may have been in this report, but I couldn't see it anywhere. Do you have a sort of a moving balance to give us some sort of update as to
I have a broad number that I use, which is around 22,000.
22? And is that, I mean, it would be useful in future reports to have that and maybe have it benchmarked back against what it was a year ago or something, because I think that's an important barometer to what is happening in the CBD in terms of numbers working and...
Absolutely. I'll try and get an accurate number.
Thank you for that. Now, Mike, you mentioned about the hotel, and I read somewhere in here that a permit has been granted for
Yes.
that. Is that build actually underway?
No, they need
okay.
to secure the operator. It's actually 6 levels of hotel and 4 levels from memory of apartments on top of that.
Yep.
But until they secure an operator, the build won't commence.
Is it an operator or a financier?
No, an operator. No, the finance is in place for the
is it?
construction
Okay.
to take place, but it's all about having an operator. It falls in line with the finance side of it.
Okay, and is your understanding, I mean, I've always understood that the operators were sort of lining up at the door and have been for a number of years. Is that still the case?
Yeah, there's very much a need for at least one more 4-star or 4.5-star in Hamilton. They've been to a number of potential operators, and 3 of them remain on the table as the preferred ones.
Yep.
But, construction across the country is at capacity at the moment, and I suspect that's probably part of the issue, is that it'll probably get delayed until next year, because trying to start construction on it now, there's probably not the capacity.
Okay, so you don't know what the developer's timeline is?
They would like to start construction next year.
Okay.
I hope, in an ideal world, in first half of next year.
Okay, thank you. And just the last point, and I think we've seen this in earlier reports about a set of financial statements. I have never seen a set of financial statements. I'm sure that you've sent them to us. But Jen, could you just make a note that in the past we've been promised a set of annual financial statements for HCBA, and I'm sure they prepare them, and I'm sure that they're audited, but I've never seen a set yet.
They have come to council. I can't swear about the most recent ones, but certainly we've had a series of them. Rob?
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I can't, okay.
I think it was in between meetings, to be honest, so
Yep.
that it was emailed or something like
Okay.
that, the most recent one we had.
Okay, all right.
Where would they come?
Well, I'll follow that up with Jen, and we'll say how it's happening and what we're going to do in future. Yeah.
It's not CCO.
No.
Thank you.
But part of the agreement with them is that they report back to us with that information, amongst other stuff.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Mark.
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Chair, so the ambassador program, eh? Great news. Can you just remind us what that's going to entail?
So we have, we're working with Queenstown Resort College,
Yep.
QRC, with an ambassador program that they have worked through and initially rolled out by MB, and have rolled it out to a variety of places, Queenstown, Auckland, other places I can't remember offhand. So we're going to go with the same program because they've got a tried and tested model. Right. And so we've just signed into agreement with them, and they're coming up tomorrow afternoon for a brief catch-up. And then over the next 6 months, they will detail what's happening at each stage,
Okay.
and how that will look. But essentially, it's an endorsement program of Hamilton for Hamiltonians. So we'll be targeting some of the larger businesses initially to put staff through this and just get a better understanding of great things about Hamilton and what the city can offer.
Great.
So doing this in conjunction with, obviously with council as well, and Hamilton Waikato Tourism.
Very cool, very cool. Garden Place, the corner building there, that looks really interesting. Can you elaborate on that at this point, or is that still commercially sensitive?
What one?
Which one?
The orange one with the...
Oh, the orange one, yeah. So we've sold that to Matt Stark,
Yep.
who's going to redevelop it completely internally. He's got a law firm that's going to take the top floor, and then the rest of it he's going to turn it into shared and co-working space. Again, that's a worldwide growing demand for that co-working and shared space, where you may have your own space, you may be in an open plan, but you'll have shared meeting rooms, boardroom, cafe facilities. So that's all well underway. I think the law firm's got to be in there in the next sort of 3 months. We've leased them some additional car parks behind Worley Place, so it's all well underway, which is awesome, because it is such a key site within the CBD.
I was hearing rooftop bar, and I was hoping you'd get there.
Yep, there's a potential for a rooftop bar there as well.
Trust you to think of that.
Well, we're talking about pies, so...
Yeah.
I'll also throw in there that Matt's moving Stark property
Yeah.
Into that
base
building.
to that building as well.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's because Panama House, which is a co-working space that they run down on Grantham Street, that's full. So there's
Yeah.
Such high demand for that co-working space that they're going to come up into here.
They will continue to move. They
will
always move
continue to-
around.
Yeah.
They'll move because somebody will
excited
want
by
their
it.
space and they will move. But you'll remember they did the cafe on the top of the T&G building.
Yeah.
Can't
Milk
remember
and
what it
Milk
was.
and honey.
Milk and honey went fabulously. So, and everyone said you can't do hospitality above ground floor.
Yeah.
Obviously proved that wrong. So yeah, it'll be awesome. He'll do a great job.
And timeline on that? Any...
Yeah, it'll be before Christmas at this point in time.
That it opens?
The majority. Oh no, the rooftop will be next year, but a lot of the office will be done before Christmas.
October.
Wow, hey, that's great. And finally, the IRD, what's their timeline on their location?
And their leave is October.
Yeah,
was
October
the last
this
one I
year.
heard.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it,
So it kind of will, it'll be IRD leaves, DHB comes in, it should sort of quid pro quo that.
right, is it not in the same building though, is it?
No.
No.
So is any word on what that building's going to be?
So that's been bought by Ian Castles from the Wellington company, who's he's a massive developer in Wellington. A little bit undecided as to what it will be at the moment. It's likely to be a mix of commercial and residential type uses. He's toying with a hotel. It could be student accommodation. There's quite a variety of uses that he has potential for. Sorry? Yes.
No,
The
it's
No,
IRD
the one
building.
behind the ID
Down.
building and behind.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Riverside of that, yeah.
Very good.
Yep. Okay, thanks. Angela, please.
Just a quick question on the pedestrian count cameras, and I know that you've been chasing the data and haven't quite got your hands on that yet. But what kind of data will that give us other than pedestrian count, obviously pedestrian counts and how many people are in the CBD on a daily basis? And what opportunities will that give you?
So I'll start the conversation, then hand it over to Mike in terms of the opportunities around the commercial side. But the data itself, I can see the data and I can see the camera action happening on a dashboard at a point in time, if you like. But what it does show, when we can get it all collated together and show some trending information, it can show how many people, who's at what location, where the numbers are, what times of day are key shopping times, and we can marry that up with the market view data we're also getting. We can marry that up with the car parking data we're getting to be able to tell when are the key shopping times, where the opportunities exist going forward for business development or commercial places to be located based on what the demand is showing from these pedestrian counts. And as said, it can also show around activation and activities where the impact is had, particularly with some of the cameras we've got around Garden Place, which will be great. Garden Place, and we're getting one down in Victoria in the river. But also changing landscape. So Alexandra Street, for instance, will be significantly impacted when the DHB move in. So it'll be really interesting to be able to see what, for those businesses, particularly hospitality businesses, what those foot flows are doing, the time of day, when it'd be good. It can tell things like opening hours or, potential opportunities to change perhaps some of the models around traditional retailing as it exists.
Is it, just before we go to Mike, is it similar to our or our parking ones work on sensors. So is this work on a thermal camera?
Movement,
Movement?
yeah.
Okay.
So any that are low, you could jump backwards and forwards.
So in terms of an end thing that you see, you've got a computer screen and you can see, you see
Yep.
movement images?
No, I just see numbers ticking over.
Okay,
It's just,
alright.
it's a
It just
number
records
counting.
as- okay,
Yeah.
alright.
But it's also got the weather on there, so you can tell when, if people are affected by the weather, and
Yeah.
so some, again, for informing things like events and predictions around that sort of information, it will be quite.
And then that will give you a more accurate count than we've had in the past in terms of 4,000 people turned up to the Chinese Lantern Festival, for example, and things like that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yep.
So when do you hope to get your hands on that data finally?
So they're all in operation now, so going forward now I've got that.
Yeah. And who owns the cameras?
Council own the majority
Yep.
of them.
Okay.
But we have also linked in with some businesses who also had cameras on a data share scenario, so.
So is this software that works in addition to with our CCTV cameras, or are they completely separate cameras?
I understand they're completely separate.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Marcom's used them. Actually, the fascinating guy that runs them really understands retail, but you can go from telling how many people walk past your door and why aren't they coming in. He was told us an interesting story where they had a store and they go, look, business is just awful. And he went back and actually looked at the data and go, do you know what? The pedestrian count walking past your store has not changed.
You're not
But
getting
what
them
has
in.
happened is you've actually changed your labels as a women's fashion retailer, and all of a sudden it dived, and there really wasn't a market for what they thought there was going to be. They're trialling it in Adelaide, and they can tell whether people are happy or sad. There's a whole lot of really interesting.
What, by the speed they walk?
Oh,
or?
no, they can tell whether people are hungry or not, and how close they are
really-
to hospitality, and whether they utilise the hospitality that's within a.
So those are obviously, they're overlaying
Slightly.
massive assumptions,
Yes.
correct? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Or, I
not
mean,
quite
how
the
do you
same
know if
cameras,
someone's
but-
physically hungry?
So they've gone for a more high-tech one over there.
Okay.
yeah.
But
Right,
this is
yeah.
where it is going in terms of that information
Yeah.
that can be found out. and
But they
how-
might be able to tell you've actually on your credit card or whatever you've actually, and GPS tracking, that you've actually been into 3 cafes today, and
Right.
there's a whole lot of really interesting information they can have out. It is fascinating. But retailers need to understand it, especially when they're considering coming to Hamilton. They need to understand that metadata of, again, how many people have walked past, the
Key
demographic
days.
that's from it. What time of day are they coming past? What is our business? Who do we want to be near? There's a whole lot of. Council had a really good report done over 3 full days in 2005, and we've never had anything since then. And it is a consistent message we get asked from national and international retailers.
Quite interestingly, there was actually a retailer that is looking at the moment who came down and said, I stood on the corner of X Street at 9:30 in the morning and nobody was around. And he was quite right, but I went back through the pedestrian data, and actually between 10:30 and 12:30 there were a ton of people around, so it actually takes out that, you might go for one single point in time. That's not necessarily the absolute picture of what's happening.
And Mike, in terms of commercial advantage, obviously the data will attract retailers, but it would be good for developers looking at putting in inner city residential and things like that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And they are toying with that. So you don't need to necessarily have it on a apartment building, but you want to be able to track when those people come out of that apartment building, where do they go, what streets do they go down. So some really interesting. But we've, for a long time, need that. You've got to be able to quantify the data, but it's got to be over a period of time. As Vanessa said, you stand outside one place one day for half an hour and there's no one there. But if you look at the long-term trend, and we'll see a lot more changing trends.
And Vanessa, once you've got your hands on that information and it's working properly, you will do some sort of a comms approach to that, and so that people know that service is now there, and
Yep,
whether
and
you
put some
charge them for it or not. I mean, it's your information, isn't it?
Key messaging out about
Yeah.
what it's actually telling about what's happening in the CBD.
It'll
which I
be
think
good
is
to
quite
be able to
important.
break some of those perceptions that CBD's dying, it's dying, when actually the data will hopefully, anecdotally, we know it's not dying, it's improving. So that'll be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Martin, please.
A brief comment at the end when you're.
Yeah, that's all. Okay. Mark.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. Could have asked this before, but that stimulated a bit of thinking. I mean, who's going to own that data?
In terms of the pedestrian count
Yeah.
data, that's owned by council.
Okay.
The cameras are predominantly owned by council.
Okay, because I'm just thinking of the privacy implications for people. I
There's
presume that's
nothing
all
to
covered.
attribute to an individual, but there's
Right.
no, we haven't gone for the,
Okay,
for the
yeah,
cameras that
yeah.
can identify particular people. As I said, I just see number counts. I don't see any information.
Yeah.
Not that we saw Gary Mallett walking past here, and here, and here.
Yeah.
Well, I've got Angela's right here. It's very interesting. No, thank you. That's okay.
Thanks. If there's no other questions, I'll put the recommendation that we receive the report, seconded by James. Martin, you want to speak really briefly to that?
2.3 about the CBD Celebration Awards, and obviously that's, but just noting how you're using the Hamilton Hotel, and obviously I guess a hope, which you're probably doing, that with council and other players, you know, the balance between the modernity and heritage, streetscapes, all of that, and I think I acknowledge that you have a critical role to play in how our CBD looks, and I think you're doing that. And also be very interested in future in terms of any data as the apartments go in, you know, what dynamic that adds in terms of shoppers access, you know, all of that thing as we, if you like, as we transform our CBD. But I just want to compliment you on what I think, to me, not being a retailer myself, is a really high level of data that you're providing. And I think it's also a really good example where a local authority has a partnership contract with a group such as you know, in terms of devolving certain responsibilities to you on behalf of the community. And I think that comes up with a win-win, and very clearly don't just wait for these reports in terms of, you know, if there are things that we need to know about quickly, that's very, very important. And just compliment you and your team on what I think is a very high level of professional work and presentation.
I don't think there's any risk of waiting, Vanessa, waiting till the 6 monthly report if we need to know something. None at all. Any other speakers? If not, I'll put the resolution that we receive the report. Those in favour say aye, those against no. That's carried. Thank you very much once again. We enjoy the relationship. It's good. Okay, councillors, we're on to the GM's report, which starts on page 95. And we're going to start with, I'm going to do these or chunk by chunk, and try and keep the each GM's group together, which was, don't worry Stafford, we're still starting with you, and the growth indicator report we've got here. So Stafford's going to speak to that, and then Jen, we might just look, if you could help us look through for your other ones in your area, and we'll just sort of group them, and then we'll go on to Evalisa's area.
Economy?
Correct, yes.
Yep, thank you.
And that attachment is correct. Stafford, over to you, thanks.
Oh, well, good afternoon, councillors. I would just like to note that I am back here before we've had a briefing on this topic. I know last time we did discuss having a briefing. We're actually doing that tomorrow. I just wanted to apologise for not getting that sooner to you. So there'll be an opportunity for detailed feedback tomorrow on where you would like changes potentially to these reports. But in saying that, are there any questions?
Okay. Gary, have you got something you're trying to find? Or trying to work out what question you're going to ask? Come on, councillors, this is your opportunity. Oh, Rob, thanks. Yep.
Finding his notes. Just a little bit concerned about the population estimate on 105 being 2017, which is about 15 months old now. And I think we've raised this in the past about how old that statistic is and how important that stat, to me anyway, is in terms of decisions that we make around, you know, city growth and decisions around infrastructure and so forth. Is there a way that, and we may have asked this question before in this forum, is there a way that we can get, I mean, it is an estimate, So, but is there a way that we can get a more up-to-date estimate?
It's not our estimate, though. It's Statistics New Zealand's subnational estimate. It's the official one used by the government.
Yeah, but surely there must be. I mean,
No, I'm agreeing with you.
We subscribe to Infometrics, and you know, so while New Zealand Stats is the fallback position, there must be some providers out there with some more up-to-date figures.
They actually do a 30 June estimate for each year in between the census years. So maybe is that the problem?
So that's produced every October, but we produce our own forecast for population and dwellings. So as an interim measure, there's our best projection for what the number should be in the year. And until stats come through with their more detailed revision, we just need to either use our own projections as in alignment with the 10-year plan, and then once Statistics New Zealand with their wealth of data sets can come through with what the official estimate is, we update. We do have to wait for them, and as I say, like, it's due to be updated shortly. It's in October.
Yeah, I saw that in the report, yeah. So could I suggest then, as an alternative, where you have that population estimate June 2017 per Stats New Zealand, that we below that have our own estimate, because the users of this, not only us but other users in the report, may well find more up-to-date figures useful for their own planning too. To me, it's a key driver between decisions that are made, and I guess where we're able to provide GDP up to March 18, and we can provide the number of businesses is still set at 17. It is more useful, I think, if we can provide, even if they're estimates, as these are, we can provide more up-to-date figures.
Okay, I'll take that on board, and I think we can discuss this more tomorrow. The purpose of the report and being careful with the quality of the data that comes out is very important. I mean, I don't want to get into too many details now, given that we're going to cover this again tomorrow. Okay. But it's more to do with that. There's a wider stakeholder. There's more stakeholders that use this data, that we need to ensure that everything in it is of a quality that meets the standard. So while there's ways to have like a provisional estimate for a year before the Stats New Zealand one, it's not necessarily a consistent messaging when we come through and revise that a few months later when the stats come out with the gold standard for the year. So there are some difficulties, and I understand the challenges that having data sets that do seem to be out of date. I mean, as you're saying, 18 months old data for population doesn't necessarily cut it for all practical purposes.
Can we put pressure on Stats New Zealand to do this quarterly? I mean, they do a lot of other stats quarterly. Surely what they do annually as an estimate, they could do quarterly as an estimate?
From a technical level, I don't think there's the ability to put pressure on, but if any of you guys have good contacts down in Wellington and want to get Stats New Zealand some more money to get more stats done, I'd be eternally grateful.
I think that Rob raises a good point, because while what you say is the official story, in the way I understand Stats collects these figures, they have their base figure and then they add births, deaths and immigration figures, which do come in flowing on a regular basis and not just once a year. So, and we're not the only, any growth council has got in this situation wanting to be more up to date. I happen to know that I've had a problem in the passenger transport planning area where they're using figures that are more than a year out, these figures more than a year out of date. I don't know, they haven't got them from your publication, but they've got them from Stats New Zealand. And, you know, I'm saying, well, look, you're 5,000 behind the 8 ball already before you even start your calculations about what's going to happen in future years. So in terms of, I mean, the purpose of us doing this is so that we can do planning, not just the outside groups. So I'm not trying to be critical of what you're getting, because what you're getting is what's been given to you, but there are ways to get it more up to date, I believe. in the same way that Rob talked about. So, I mean, let's have that conversation tomorrow in some more detail.
Yep, sounds good.
Martin.
Maybe tomorrow, but what I think we are looking for is the information on our perimeters. So, you know, we've always talked, so obviously if there's a major housing development, Morrinsville, Cambridge, Tamahiri, wherever, that obviously has a direct impact in terms of city, because many of those people are going to commute into Hamilton. And how hard would it be to come to some agreed point from us as a council to look at our sort of what I call the greater Hamilton area and have some intel as well? Because I don't think we can be looking at our stuff in isolation to say some of the significant developments that are happening in our surrounding towns, and particularly anything that's just, you know, where Waikato just is consenting to some lifestyle block just across our boundaries, current boundaries.
Yep, so that is really important, and it's important that we understand that. There is a lot of activity on the boundaries, and we're also aware that we're looking to the future as far as Wood Council, you know, Wood Hamilton City Council eventually encompass some of those areas. Even if that wasn't the case, it is important. So we are progressing that. So as far as our growth modelling is going, we're creating more flexibility in our growth modelling to try and be able to model some of those areas. And I think that's very good feedback, you know, probably for yesterday as well, is that, you know, if there's a renewed interest in those areas, then we can go away and do the investigation and use other data sets and present that information basically. So, you know, there are many things that you can do and look into with sort of finite resource, and I think that's probably a really good one to focus on.
Could you come, I mean, I don't know if that's the feel of the troops, but if you come back to us on that, because it just seems to me there's an appendix and what I'm going to suggest, I know it gives you extra work, but it becomes integral to our presentation. So at the same time as we're tracking within our current boundaries,
yep.
We should be tracking a mutually agreed upon outer boundary you know, limit, because obviously that has huge impact in terms of investment flows and a whole and transport implications and all of that.
Transport planning particularly, I mean, we were given the figure at the Regional Council a couple of weeks ago that there were 98,000 vehicle movements per day between Hamilton and the surrounding commuter area out to Morrinsville, Raglan, Talmutu, so forth. So to know where they were coming from and which areas were building up faster than others would be quite important, and none of that's from within Hamilton City. It's all between us and those, in both directions, I might add. So we really need to know what's happening in the nearby areas that influence us, and, you know, the fact that we are only just now trying to fix Gordonton, we probably, if we'd been looking at figures out what was happening out there, we might have recognised some problems a bit earlier just by looking at the trends, population trends.
And it's just final comment, it's been said before, and I'd probably, whether this is the right place to raise it, I noticed on the item 11, the page 107 on the infill, and, you know, 2017, 50% of consents were infill, 57% were in, so far in 2018, I've heard comments from around this table that, you know, some of the infill looks good, some of it's not. And I'm wondering through Jen, I think it's high time we had a very comprehensive workshop about looking at where it's working well, where it's not working so well, and in terms of the next 10-year plan, under whoever's the mayor and the council, some real consideration about some urban redevelopment budget in terms of footpaths, street lighting, and really, dare I say it, doing a walking tour actually around some of the Melvilles and the Knighton Road areas, around some of our high density, and just on the ground seeing what's kind of working well and what's not, because if we take this on for the next 5 or 10 years, what's not working now will get worse and worse in years to come. What is working well, obviously, I would hope would be guiding our future planning.
Yep, thanks for that comment. Gary, please.
Thank you. It's on page 105, Stafford, under your key findings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your fifth bullet point, you finish off with a sentence saying the supply of sections is expected to remain strong. Is that in the context of we're trying to develop special housing accords because we don't have enough, well, apparently don't have enough land available for sections? What do you mean by the supply of sections is expected to remain strong?
So that is in relation to more detailed analysis on page 109 under the sections and unit titles, 224Cs.
Yep.
So basically there is a large number of sections that have been consented over the previous few years, and they haven't necessarily all turned into titled sections yet. So there's this stock of consented, sections that haven't turned into titles yet. Therefore, there's this supply of sections that can be enabled when the developer is ready to bring them online. So just that there is this growing number of consented activities being the sections is strong.
And that's a growing number, is it?
Yes, it's been growing.
Okay. So this is developers prepared to withhold their stock from the market. Is that right?
I couldn't speculate on what the developers are doing, but I
Okay.
do know that there has been construction constraints. So
Oh, they can't
potentially it's just they're ready to go, they're getting their ducks in a line, and they'll release sections when they can. And also there's been some significantly large consents that have been granted, so they'll take a while to roll out. Just like Rototuna has some of the consents there have been granted for a long time, and they've rolled out over significant periods of time.
Thank you. And the last bullet point talked about net immigration numbers have been steadily increasing since 2014. And then it said the main, it's a bit faint, the main driver for this has been people arriving on work visas. What are people arriving, who are people arriving on work visas? Are they temporary visitors, immigrants, are they?
It's all work visas, but I do understand that the cyclical nature of the temporary work visas can be quite strong in a large volume of the work visas. But
So are these likely to be permanent residents, or are they likely to be people here studying while they're working while they're studying, or things like that? Who are these?
The data set's aggregated, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
But there's definitely student visas. So if you're on a student visa and you're able to work, you're not counted in that group. But comparing this sort of the temporary nature of the work visa, it's not, the data set's not broken down into if they're coming in on skilled shortage visas, which allow them to stay here permanently, or sort of a fruit picking visa.
Okay, so, because I don't understand the visa thing, so a working visa is not necessarily a permanent residency type thing?
Correct.
Pardon?
Towards residency, but they don't, it's not automatic for them. And people on student visas can work up to 20 hours a week only, but again, it's not a residency thing.
So is this likely to overstate our possible population? Like, will a lot of these people have to go back to wherever they've
Yep.
come from?
Yep.
After they've finished? So would this be like people who pick fruit in Hawke's Bay and then go back to Fiji or wherever they come from? So they're only here for 6 months or something?
That's a working visa holiday, so, yeah.
But what are the, and I know you, what are these type of people?
So the comment was more in relation to the types of drivers for immigration have remained steady for the work visas, but while there's a sort of diminishing number of people coming into the country now, it's not necessarily been the work visas that are changing in anything. So it's the other visa types, or actual citizens returning to New Zealand. The flow of the other categories has lessened. This is what's changing the migration flows.
We might be able to expand on that tomorrow, but anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a couple of small questions myself, Stafford, on page 106, just looking at some of the graphs. So the one in the middle of 106, the new residential dwellings consented by building type, that's showing, if I'm just checking that I'm right, for the first half of the current calendar year, we have got 635 new residential dwellings consented, and if you extrapolate out over a whole year, 1270, nearly 1300, which, so it's heading for a record number of new dwelling consents. Is that, am I reading that right?
Yeah,
For
correct.
in the
We've
year
had,
we're
we've
sitting
had
in
a
at the
very
moment?
strong start to the year, yeah.
Yeah, much higher than the last three, well, a bit higher than the last 3 years. And looking just immediately below that, looking at the May 2018, far and away a record number of consents issued for in 1 month.
Yeah, for the time period that's showing. I mean,
Yeah.
like going back historically, not necessarily a record, but yes, in that since 2012, by far and
Okay,
away
sure.
higher.
So where things are not slowing down in the slightest, just looking at those, in terms of new buildings and construction in that area. Yep, so we're facing that coming up in the lift, I guess. Okay, any other questions? Oh, sorry, Mark.
Just one very brief one, just on the page over from that 107, I noticed there's some grey areas in that map. Does that mean there's been no growth at all? Is that right? Like, for example, your Porritt, your Te Rapa North, etc.
That means there's 0 dwellings under construction in that area
Well,
at this time.
Cool, I live in a dead area. Brilliant. Thank
Yep. Okay, well, more discussion tomorrow. Thanks very much, Stafford, Greg.
Thanks very much.
When's that next conference, Greg, of the DC's conference? Okay, councillors, that's actually the only one of Jen's ones, so we'll go on to Chris's ones, eh? Which is what's he now called? The GM Infrastructure. Is that right? No, GM Development. You're GM Infrastructure, sorry. Can't keep up with the alphabet soup. GM Development. Chris, are we going to start on page 96 with the transport policy document?
No, I've decided to downdress, councillor, so,
So this is,
just like Harry's my inspiration.
yeah, page 96, top of page 96 and 97 with the first chunk. So Chris, do you just want to work your way through them?
Yep. So councillors, under the transport policy document there, they were just a reminder of all the documents that council has submitted on, and they all lead up. A lot of them lead up to the National Land Transport Program, which is the government or New Zealand Transport statement of what projects they're going to fund. So you heard some of that from Harry today. So I thought I'd just give you just a general rundown of how we have fared in that document. So the document was only launched and published on Friday. So I've spent a bit of time since then just looking through the document just to check alignment with our plans and what government is signalling they're going to fund. We did discuss it at the first regional transport committee around the country yesterday in the Waikato, so with Councillor McPherson there as our rep, so that was the first one around the country that had a presentation. So clearly there's been a significant shift as signalled in all of the policy documents leading up to this, away from state highway improvements to rail, particularly to some of the to deal with some of the issues in Auckland. So there's been a clear policy shift that's been signalled and is now featured in the NLTP. So in terms of the projects and how they affect us here in the Waikato and Hamilton, and the good things, clearly they've committed to completing the Waikato Expressway. So there's still, lots and lots of funding required to complete the Hamilton section and the Huntly section and all the other sections. So Hamilton alone, well in excess of $100 million commitment still required to complete that. So that's good and probably not surprising that they've reconfirmed their commitment to finish that. They have pulled back on some of the priorities for the region, and in particular the Cambridge to Prairie and completing that section. That project's about 1 of 10 that's gone into is being reviewed. So there's about 10 projects that they are reviewing nationally, and that's one of them, just to figure out where they go from here. So they have pulled back from that, and there's no substantive funding to progress that. Southern Links, which is dear to our hearts, they've confirmed their commitments to existing property purchase and some of the pre-implementation environmental monitoring that's required. So they've still got quite a significant property purchase program. We heard yesterday that they've got 3 significant properties under negotiation at the moment, and if they complete those, NZTA would own about half or 50% of the properties to build the Southern Links, which is good news.
Including the Narrows Golf Club.
Yeah, I think that's one of the properties they're in discussion, which is one of the more difficult purchases they've probably got to complete. So it's really a good way ahead of constructing these projects that you've got an agency working on these things over time and just dealing with landowners when they're willing sort of sellers, etc. I think listening to them yesterday, they would have liked to had more money confirmed for more property purchase, but with the pressure on the state highway program, that didn't come through on the NLTP, so we heard that yesterday. So in terms of the large regional projects, that was the outcome. In terms of if you come back to our own program, and we've fared really well in terms of alignment with our wishes and desires and seeing that reflected in the NLTP. Look, they've confirmed our commitments to the Ring Road, the Resolution Drive extension and all of the Peacocks arterials. So the projects that are underway and all of that funding has been confirmed, so to expectations, which is really good. Probably really pleasing is our whole transport improvement program has just been directly reflected in the National Land Transport Program as well. So a couple of points to make there, like the National Land Transport Program is just an indication of projects that could go subject to business case approval. So all of those projects, you've still got to go through quite a detailed process of a business case to justify those projects to unleash the funding that's signalled in the NLTP. But if it's not in the NLTP, you can't do it. So it's really good news that our whole program, I can see in the NLTP in the same timing that we've put into our program. So that's really good. Yeah, and I think through that they've confirmed our operation and maintenance funding and renewal funding, and we're just working through that, but that seems to be all to expectations as well. So it's always a worrying time just when they publish the NLTP to make sure there's good alignment, so there appears to be, so that's really good. So probably happy to answer any questions on that section.
Can I maybe kick it off, Chris, by talk about Southern Links? Now, we've had no advance on that, even though we've been submitting to both the current and previous sort of government's NZTA outfit that we need there needs to be a signal of construction start date because it's integrally linked with Peacocks. And we heard also earlier today about the Te Awa River ride, perhaps being able to utilise the bridge, the west bank of the river and the bridge. But if there's no Southern Links, there's no Southern Bridge down at the Narrows and things like that. So, what's the? I know you can't speak for them, but if that's actually slipping backwards, are we putting future parts of Peacock's development in jeopardy and potentially reducing the value of HIF because it can't proceed past sort of phase 1?
Look, I'd take a positive view first on that. Like, we'd all like things to go quicker. But look, the really positive thing on Southern Links, and this council has advocated for many, many years, like my whole time on council and probably in my prior job as well, that this is an important project. We've battled to get support for that over the years, as Councillor Dave would know, but at this point in time it receives really good support from the region and our neighbours in terms of a priority project. The really good news is it's good to be in a position where you're ready to go with these big transport projects. So over the last 5 years, we as council have worked really, really closely with NZTA to designate the project. For those of you who were here at the time, it was probably one of the most complicated designation projects in New Zealand across 3 territorial authorities, a joint project with us and NZTA. We secured the designation and all of the resource consents to build the bridge. So that's really important in terms of ready to go, and we've got that. It's really positive that NZTA are purchasing property, and I think their property budget is north of $60 million, I think, in terms of buying properties. So
For this project?
For this state highway project, the Southern Links, so it's really positive that they're buying the properties. So I guess the best that we expected and what we were advocating for through these documents was over the next 3 years, which is 2018 to 2021, was to have the funding in there to complete all of the property purchase and have the project ready to go. And it would have been great to see a signal that they would look to fund it from 2021 on. So that's the signal that we've been looking for, that they'd move from this property purchase phase over the next 2 to 3 years to construction, etc. I guess with the change in funding away for state highway improvements, we haven't got that decision. Good news is they've still got the property purchase to still keep things ticking along, and I expect, through you, Mr Chair, that we'll just continue our advocacy at every opportunity that this is an important project for urban growth, for housing, for economic development, for a whole range of things, and we just keep battling away.
Can I push back a bit on your glass half full statement, Chris? Because noting that we were told yesterday at the Regional Transport Committee meeting that there was, the word used by NZTA was there was a squeeze on funding for land purchase, and that the implication there wasn't enough in there to do 100% of the designation purchase, one, and two, that the project that, in fact, the current governing parties had railed against while in opposition, the Holiday Highway from Puhoi to Wellsford, got the big tick, but we didn't. So I'm wondering whether we've had enough advocacy on behalf of this key project down here. The other project, the Pairere State Highway 1, also didn't get the go-ahead, yet projects to the north of Auckland did, and is that a function maybe of some more advocacy needed from the Waikato?
Yeah, look, from my perspective, I think the advocacy's been great. Certainly from this council, it's been a consistent theme, and the good thing has been working away to get it latched into the regional priorities through the regional land transport plan. So I think the advocacy is good. It's just a timing issue, and I expect we're not going to take the foot off the accelerator in terms of advocacy. I'd expect that would be council's view.
Would it help if the regional council, for instance, didn't put Southern Links at number 5 on their priority list, and us have an internal fight with them to try and elevate that if it was actually number 1?
Look, I think there's a difference between priority and programming, and the difference there is this ready to go thing. So if you're at the top of the list in priority, which we are, being ready to go when funding opportunities there, I think it's more important. So to me, priority and programming sit side by side, but they're slightly separate. So it's a programming issue that we're talking to them about now.
Okay, thanks. Martin, please. Oh, Jeff, were you on the list?
Yeah, it was all on Southern Links, so.
Oh, okay, sorry, Martin. Thanks.
Yeah, obviously good news about Southern Links, which is of course going to be our southern boundary in years to come. Obviously that's a given. Just probably picking up on Harry Wilson's point around the any road improvements south of the Cambridge Expressway to Tauranga and south. Obviously I'm picking up as stressing the money for the major black spots in the area. But do you have any sense around still a long-term strategy of reserving proper road corridors through, for example, to the Kaimais further south, in terms of having a high quality in years to come highway, whether it's a 2+2 or 2+1 or whatever?
So that was part of our advocacy and some of the submissions we made, that if they weren't going to be funded, we would like to see the work progress in preserving the opportunity, i.e. investigating routes if they're greenfield and designating them, a bit like what we've done with Southern Links, so
Sure.
you don't lose that opportunity. They haven't provided for that in the NLTP. Those particular projects have gone into the review phase. I think some members, including our member, tried to get a bit more detail on that yesterday, but I think the answer was they're in review, and we'll let you know when they pop out a renew.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
The other thing I noticed, just my observation in the National Land Transport Program, that they have assigned about $5 million of work for safety improvements on that Cambridge to Pyeri length. So I think they're still focused on the safety of that length and looking at some of the crashes, and for $5 million on that length, it's probably wire ropes and some things there. I have asked a question and for someone to come back to me, where did the State Highway 129 intersection fit up? Because I think that would be a good
It seems
project, and I've
Can
asked
I
a
ask
question.
you and the chair, obviously, to me, that obviously I get the safety bit, but the intersection of Porirua is crucial. And obviously, when people are coming off expressways, there's a whole need of driver change behaviour and the accident records when expressways finished. But could you come back to us, because it seems to me, in my view, I might be just one, our city really needs to focus on a long-term strategy in terms of our links, particularly with Tauranga and south towards Tokoroa, you know, the main trunk towards Taupo, in terms of just ensuring that we have future-proofing of those corridors. So I understand in the short term it's safety works, that's a priority, but it seems to me crucial, a bit like we've done with Southern Links, is that we still press ahead and lobby for the long-term future-proofing of those routes.
Yeah, so through you, Mr Chair, perhaps there's a place for a formal response to the announcement of the NLTP that puts our position in place, so perhaps I could work on that
If you could,
desired.
and by the time we come to the end of the GM's report, we'll add that into the resolution.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you, Mr Chair.
I notice also point 33, Leo, I don't know whether you saw that, the proposal is you and I, with staff, work out our official response to the regional passenger transport plan, because there isn't much time, and then that come back here retrospectively, but the council can change it after the event. We've got to lodge something though, so that's the proposal there. 33, so Chris will need to work.
Yep.
Oh, that's part B of the staff recommendation.
So with my change in role, I think Evelisa and Robin picked that one up, and they've written that section, so they're listening to that.
Okay. Is there enough support in the program for our whole Access Hamilton transport improvements program, the $220 odd million 10-year program?
So the NLTP really gives clarity on the next 3 years, and our whole program is reflected in the NLTP as published, so there's really good alignment on that. It's still subject to business case, which I'd suggest would be tricky in some cases. It's also predicated on a 51% assumed subsidy, so there's no guarantee that all of those projects will get 51%.
Some of them might get 75.5, mightn't they?
Yep, there's also the opportunity, as you heard Harry talk about today, of getting something between 51 and 100%. So we're on top of that policy development and are working to see what opportunities there are to leverage that. The developing policy would require you to reinvest that money back into transport. If you were to win an extra subsidy, they want to see it reinvested back into transport. So there's a lot of things to work through, but we're on top of that as that policy is developing.
Okay, and so that analysis will be reported back to the Access Hamilton Task Force in the first place, that in terms of the potential money, the subsidy that's available?
For the enhanced subsidy? Yeah, absolutely. We'll feed that back through that channel for Access Hamilton Task Force GNI.
Thanks. Are there any other questions on this part? If not, we'll move on to the next one. We'll come back to the recommendations at the end. So we've got two more from Chris on page 98. Firstly, the Ruakura road stopping?
Yep, so the first one is good news, I guess, and just confirming to council that council, in working in partnership with TGH for developing Ruakura Port, in addition to the consents, we had to go through a local government act process to close the road. It ended up in Environment Court, and we've periodically reported to council. So the Environment Court has now made their decision and confirmed council's decision to stop the road. So that's good. It just takes another big risk away for the port. So it's just closing the loop and reporting back to council that their decision has now been confirmed by Environment Court.
Gary, you've got a question on that one? No, the next one. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. We'll get Chris to give his rundown on the passenger rail service and then come to you, Gary.
Yep. So in terms of passenger rail and in terms of the brief update I put there, so the previous resolution of G&I was to report back once the detailed business case has been finalised, but prior to 1 October when the Transport Agency approval was expected of the business case. I think at that time our expectation was that the agency would take that to their September board meeting. The expectation is now 1 month delayed, so it's programmed in for the 5th of October New Zealand Transport Agency board meeting. So look, the collective team is doing a lot of work and making good progress on the business case. Things are very tight, but it should go to the NZTA board meeting on the 5th of October. The working group, which is the collection of the Waikato councils, the Auckland councils, Kiwi Rail, NZTA, Ministry of Transport, have a meeting on the 14th of September, so in just about a week's time to receive the draft business case, prior to it then being endorsed by the working group to go up to NZTA for approval. So the draft business case is a comprehensive piece of work looking at all aspects of the service. If it's approved by NZTA, that's basically the funding approval, and the service can start because the funding is there. So as previously reported to council, there's a substantial funding commitment required from central government in all parts of this business case. So it's a really important and big decision for NZTA to make on the 5th of October. So look, I'm probably happy just to answer any questions on that. Look, I haven't seen the full business case yet. I'll be getting a copy of it prior to the 14th of September meeting to provide some commentary just to make sure it meets council's expectations in terms of the funding that we've approved in our 10-year plan, the subsidy expectations that we have, etc., etc. So within the next week, I'll be seeing a draft and checking that before it goes to the working party on the 14th.
Thanks. We've got Gary, then Martin.
On paragraph 26 of, 46, beg your pardon, on page 98, talks about the New Zealand Transport Agency early review of detailed business case identified 4 key areas: ownership of rolling stock, contract management for service, ticketing and network access. Now, they all seem to me to be subsequent factors. The key factor I would have thought was, and I assume the rationale for even thinking about this is, A, we want to reduce congestion on the motorway, and B, that people will use the rail, and they are somewhat related factors, but they're not identical factors. So, because I have seen some early on, 6 months ago, I saw some really preliminary research on how many people use it, and the number of people who wouldn't drive was, the number of cars off the road was pathetically small. Would not make a dent in any congestion situation. So I just wonder, when will this be part of the business case?
Yeah. So clearly, yes. So that's a big part of the business case. Can I just probably articulate how the government have indicated they want to look at this service?
Sorry, can I stop you there? There's you guys have got a business case framework that you use, haven't you?
So in
Better Business or something, or?
in New Zealand, Treasury lead a process called the Better Business
Yeah.
case process that all government departments should look at. So that's quite a detailed and internationally recognised process where you look at your strategic case, your commercial case, your economic case, your management case and your financial case. So there's different components. NZTA have adopted that framework but put it into their own style.
Okay.
So it essentially follows the Treasury required Better Business
So that's the sort of
case.
rigour that we imposed on this business
the,
case?
The rigour is very rigorous,
rigorous?
in terms of what's happening and going up. So look, in terms of the way the government...
Sorry, the strategic business case, though, was presented to them, the startup one, back in July?
Yeah, the strategic business case has been signed off and approved. So all the strategic business case really identifies that there is an issue and it's worth pursuing, looking at options. The detailed business case then goes into looking at some of the options, identifying the preferred option and hunting down the costs of the options, the benefits of the options and why you would do it.
So this one takes it as a given that the project's going to happen then, does it?
No. This one provides the justification for the project to happen and the justification for government and others to invest in the project.
Okay, so
So clearly patronage and all of those things are important, but what I wanted to say is that the government is looking at this as a long-term Auckland to Hamilton corridor development. So what we're working on in this case is a start-up service, but the long-term vision will be at the forefront of the business case and what this might look like in 50 years and how the corridor might develop, and that's the way the government wants to see this business case presented in terms of what does it look like in the long term of that interaction between Hamilton and Auckland, and how's Hamilton going to help Auckland and vice versa? How are the communities between Hamilton and Auckland going to develop over time in terms of providing housing and employment to help the Upper North Island? And then you come back to the start-up service to start working towards that. So, there'll be some acceptance, I guess, that the patronage would grow over time as your service improves, as you get better track improvements, as you get better uptake of public transport. The motorway continues to deteriorate, so it is a long-term project that they're looking at, and that's starting to be reflected in all the transport policy that we're seeing coming through. So the government have indicated that in the next 2 years, they're currently underway with quite a substantial rail review project with this policy shift in mind, that the next government policy statement is probably going to go stronger towards funding rail and looking at rail as a viable transport option for New Zealand.
Yeah.
So in terms of patronage, yes, absolutely important, but those list of things were seen as really important potential issues that needed to be dealt with so you could have a service. If I take one as the rolling stock, so there was an indication early on that regional council might have to own all of the carriages.
Waikato Regional
Waikato Regional Council, and Waikato Regional Council said, look, we're happy to be in the business of operating public transport, but we don't want to be an owner of rolling stock. So that's one of the issues that's had to be worked through, and we found a way to do that where Kiwi Rail become the owner of the rolling stock and not regional council, with some back-to-back agreements with government about what happens to that rolling stock if the service stops. So those were the types of issues that have been worked through, and quite substantive issues in their own right in terms of the business case. Ticketing options, obviously. Access to the Auckland network is a really big issue because it's a congested network. How they work in Auckland is they have a timetabling committee where they prioritise who can have access to the track and at what time. So through the business case, we've had to find peak time services that suit the objectives of this project, but you get access into the Auckland market. So that's been worked through, and we've been to the timetabling committee, and we've got confidence around those time slots. So those are the types of issues that if you couldn't solve, you didn't have a good service.
Does the better business model have an escape route or something like that, a threshold whereby we say, look, this just ain't working, that despite all the best interests and best efforts and the best endeavours by everyone, people just aren't using it, or it's just way more expensive than we thought, or that we just can't get the trains to run on time, or whatever it is? Do we have that in, or do you just keep on funding it and funding it, funding it, even though it's losing money, like a lot of other things we do, and just there's no escape clause? I mean, is that part of the formula?
The better business case will establish, what your objectives are and the benefits you expect, and there'll be a benefits realisation. So part of the business case will be monitoring to see that you're getting what you expected with your investment.
And what happens when you're not? If you're not, when you're not, if you're not?
Potentially they'll just, I'm just speculating on this because we haven't finished the business case, but could be two things. They'll just accept that that's part of a startup service and it'll only develop over time, or they'll come to a view that it's not delivering and the project would stop.
Gary, there's the additional part of the proposal is that the startup case should be for 5 years, but there should be a review after 2 years or at about 2 years. So that's being built into the proposal as well. So those are 2 points along the way where your issues will obviously need to be discussed.
We haven't seen that stuff yet, though, have we?
No, because we're waiting for the NZTA hasn't got the business case yet because it's not completed, and they're, for instance, working this weekend, I'm told, to try and get it completed enough to get it to NZTA in time for that October the 5th meeting.
Thank you.
And to be clear for council, our direct investment into this is the rail station, and we want to do that in conjunction with the park and ride and a bus hub that we're doing. So a part of what we're doing in Rotokauri is a rail platform, but a bigger part is our park and ride and a bus interchange facility, which we're responsible for. The operation of the service, the day-to-day operation and the rolling stock is not this council's business, it's regional council's business.
So those other things you talked about, the park and ride and that, are they redundant if there's no rail?
No, that's my point. Our growing expectation is this is an important public transport hub.
Irrespective of whether there's a rail hub there.
Irrespective of whether there's a rail there. So we're looking at the regional passenger transport plan now, and we've got a lot of buses that are starting to feed into the north of the city, and you need, a bit like a Linden Court or a PT sort of hub, and this is a location. The rail was actually anchored into our district plan. We've managed to get a park and ride, so we're looking to work with regional council to develop this as a public transport hub, and it'd be great if rail was there as well.
Good. Thanks. Martin and then Angela, and then we're going to break for lunch. It's the plan.
Just building on that, I'm going back to the Chair's report. We're obviously progressing to what he calls, full-blown faster service. I assume that means the full-blown is basically from Hamilton eventually to Britomart, subject to the third line in South Auckland being put in. How does that kind of roll out the details? Because I know you're talking about, capacity issues. Obviously, you've got the loop where Britomart's station's capacity is expanded, so it can take more trains. But the southern Auckland corridor, in terms of just getting space on that, so that instead of the service obviously terminating at Papakura, it carries right through.
So if you look into the long term and you're looking at a decent speed rail service, there's a whole lot of things that need to happen, and you've measured some of them. But the ones that are currently under consideration, and I'm just not sure how it's fared in the NLTP, but I think it's probably been funded, as third main work in Auckland, so you can get passing opportunities. I think when you go to the high-speed rail, we probably need a fourth line as well through parts of Auckland. I think there would be track corner easing. If you want trains to go faster, you've got some geometric issues to do. A big one is the which you probably know is the double tracking through the Whangamarino swamp. I think it's about 13 kilometres there of single track, and also at Ngarawahia, which Councillor Dave reminded the working group the other day. They'd forgotten about that. So there are parts of the network that need double tracking between here and Hamilton. I think there are lots of signalling upgrades if you're going to higher speed trains. Also lots of level road crossing issues to deal with if you've got a fast speed service as well. Then you've got the rolling stock as well. If you move to the vision of high speed rapid rail, the rolling stock, you'll need replacement trains, and whether they're diesel, electric or hybrids, all of that needs to be worked through. If they're electric, it's the electrification of the rail line. So this is a big issue, and this is why government, I think, is doing the comprehensive review of rail prior to the next GPS, so it can inform the next GPS.
So is that what you call the second stage? You know, we hear about the first stage, the second stage is all that infrastructure, long-term.
I think I've probably painted a 30 to 40 year vision for you for some of those things.
There's a stage in between, Martin, which might be existing track but better gear and more stations stopped at and things like that.
What's in the medium term? I mean, obviously long term we go to the China way of Japan and probably really high speed trains, because obviously if you get from downtown Hamilton to Auckland within an hour and a quarter, that would be absolutely transformational, obviously, but at least getting within 2 hours from Hamilton through to downtown Auckland, you know, something, because obviously people are calculating time and stress, so they get out of their car because they get caught in the Manukau, you know, the southern car park, but still the time is a factor. So sort of how far away are we from, I guess, downtown Hamilton to Britomart basic train service that regular, obviously, but more or less is around 2 hours or 2.25 hours? What's the sort of, what do we know at this stage?
So what we know at this stage, the trip's about 2.5 hours, which is equivalent probably to a car journey in normal peak times.
2:20, Chris, is
2:20 to 2:30, yeah. If, you know, I think we can all see the motorway getting worse and worse through Auckland, so it's probably going to deteriorate over time. Trip reliability is a big issue for the rail. Look, I think there's a lot of work to do to bring that time down from the 2:20, and so the business case will touch on that, but I think it's a long way away before.
But I expect even if you reduce that by 30 minutes or 20 minutes, that becomes absolute transformational in terms of consumer uptake. The other question is the work around, you know, we're hearing talk about a busway from Manukau somewhere to Auckland, our Auckland airport. And again, obviously, it's a high risk if you're trying to check into an early morning international or domestic flight at Auckland in the morning prior to 9 o'clock. It's high risk strategy if you're going up that morning. Where is that fitting in terms of the narrative? Because it seems to me that will be one of the other big benefits of a reliable train service in terms of being able to link to a busway or transport through to the airport.
Yep. So look, my understanding is Auckland is looking at a bus express service to
Puanui Station.
Puanui. So one of the things this service is looking at in the 5 years is going further than Papakura and probably getting to the Strand. So we're looking at that at the moment. That would give it an ability to have a stop at Puhanui, which would then connect with the airport express, and then you've got the issue of additional interpeak services as well, and that option is when do you start interpeak services, so you've got a service across the day. So all of that's been looked at and will be in the business case.
Can I suggest,
Martin, can we just wrap this up with the last one?
Very quick question, and that is about the marketing of the vision, because obviously people have got to understand that what we're offering in the beginning is but the beginning, and in year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, this is sort of the additions to that vision. Otherwise, because I think that's going to be critical in terms of community and political acceptance, particularly if there was in, say, 15 years' time a change of government.
Yeah, look, my job is to work and put facts and evidence in front of council, but I expect at the 14th with the political steering group there'll be some discussions on that matter.
Thanks, Angela.
the business case come to council for consideration? Do we have an indicative time?
It should be the next meeting of this. We're not 100% sure when we're going to get it, but that's the concept that comes there. It's not. We've got to particularly work out whether we go ahead with our work out at Rotokauri. That's the issue for us. Okay. Regional Council separately has to talk about the operation of the actual service and whether they go ahead with it.
Yeah. Okay.
But certainly we're figuring it to be a major item on the agenda at the next one of these, but it may have to be at a council meeting if it doesn't time right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we're really close.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Like, I mean, getting the whole thing going.
Well, the government has allocated the right type of funding in the government policy statement, and now in the land transport program, the NZTA, they've put the right amount of funding, and they've signalled this specifically, as you noticed in your email, as an issue that a particular service has got to be funded. The dollar amounts are not yet right because they haven't been finalised, but we expect that provided everyone agrees after the 5th of October, that we'll have a start date available to give out to people from then on. So, anything else? Sorry, yep, okay. Look, well, let's break now. Let's come back. Can we at 22? That's just under 40 minutes, or do we want to 1:45? 22? Yep, thanks.